What's up, everybody? So glad to be back with you guys. Again, my name is Bria Golder, attorney at law, and today we will be talking about the different types of law and the different types of attorneys. This is super duper key for you to know because a lot of times people think that lawyers are just lawyers and we practice everything and we know every single area of law, but that is not at all the case. A lot of times you will not find a general practicing attorney. Although we are able to research whatever your problem or concern or issue may be, it's much more feasible for us to practice on one particular area of law or maybe a few different areas of law as opposed to the world and universe of law that is available and accessible to us. So, myth versus fact. A big myth is that law school teaches us everything we need to know about the law, and after we leave law school, we're able to be practicing attorneys and we can do anything. But that is not the case at all. The fact is, law school prepares us to take the bar exam, which is the exam that we have to take in order to receive our license to be practicing attorneys. Law school teaches us the law at minimum competency, which means that we learn every subject area of the law, but we don't really go in depth into any of them. It's not like we go into law school and we say, okay, I want to be a criminal defense attorney, so all of my classes are catered towards criminal defense. No, it's very important that we learn every single thing. We learn this world and wealth of knowledge, and then once we decide to practice law, we're able to minimize and focus in on whatever particular area of law it is that we want to practice in the real world. So that's kind of how that works. There are two separate types of attorneys. You have a litigation attorney and a transactional attorney. In litigation, those are the attorneys that you see drafting documents, going to the courtroom, filing motions, they're arguing their case against the opposing party, they're going before the judge, and going to trial. Those are typically the attorneys that you see on TV, in movies and TV shows. When you think of a lawyer, you think lawyer in the courtroom. Those are litigating attorneys. What you don't see as often are transactional lawyers. Transactional lawyers are the ones that do a lot of the behind the scenes work. So, for big corporations, Amazon, Walmart, you don't even necessarily have to be a big corporation. A lot of entertainment firms and things like that want to have transactional attorneys on hand. People that will never walk into the courtroom, but they handle all the paperwork to ensure that the business is in compliance with everything that it needs to do. So drafting contracts, negotiation agreements, employment agreements, things of that nature are all transactional and do not require you to go into the courtroom. But of course, you want to have transactional attorneys and litigating attorneys. And for some instances, both transactions and litigations can fall within one singular attorney. So it just depends on your situation. And today, we're going to discuss quite a few different types of attorneys. Of course, this is not a comprehensive list. It would take me days and probably weeks to go through all the different areas of law and all the different types of attorneys. But I will go through some of the popular types of attorneys that a lot of people find useful in their life and that you may need one day in your life. So let's get to it. First, we're going to start out with business law or corporate law, transactional law. Quite a few different names for this overall topic of business law. So when somebody owns a business, they most certainly need to have an attorney as their right-hand person to be able to draft contracts, negotiations, mergers and acquisitions, when it comes to potentially selling the company or buying shares, selling shares, especially when you start to get into larger companies that have quite a few assets. Assets are things that are valuable aside from money. So think about if you purchase real estate, if your business owns a building or a piece of real estate that's worth a couple $1 million, that is an asset for the business. And so if anything were to ever happen to your business, you need to have an attorney there that's able to split up and divide those assets properly so that people aren't able to sue your corporation or your business for money that's owed. especially to creditors. So if you have a person that's working for your business that owes a creditor, which is a person that gives money and the other person has to pay it back, the debtor has to pay it back. And so if they owe a creditor, you don't want them to be able to sue your corporation for that person's debt. You want to always make sure you're protected, that your transactions are protected, that your paperwork is drafted properly, and that you have a business attorney in place for that reason. Most times, business attorneys, corporate attorneys will be strictly transactional. Of course, if anything makes it outside of the corporate sector, which would require you to go to court, then you'd need a litigator to be able to litigate that claim. But most times, corporations try to protect themselves in a way where everything is handled in-house and that they are very thorough in drafting their paperwork, their employment agreements, their employee relations, all that good stuff, so that they never have to go to court to litigate any particular issue. Next, we'll talk about bankruptcy. So bankruptcy may or may not be something that you know about just yet, but bankruptcy essentially is when people take out loans, they take out credit, they borrow money from banks and different places, and they can't pay it back. And so you always need to have a bankruptcy attorney, and this does not apply to just businesses. People personally file bankruptcy as well when they just have debt that's over their head and they don't have the funds to return it. So as opposed to worrying about paying back all this debt and how they're going to find the money and where they're going to get it from, they just file bankruptcy, and it's kind of like a fresh start on your credit report and in life. The debt goes away. And I don't want to make it seem like it's 100% good. Of course, a bankruptcy is not a good reflection on your credit score overall, but sometimes when you are just drowning in debt, it may be the best option. In any case, you need to have a bankruptcy attorney that knows how to cover your bankruptcy. So they're able to handle the bankruptcy for you, all of the paperwork. They ensure that you come out as good as possible on the back end of that bankruptcy filing. So bankruptcy attorneys are good for personal or for business, and you may or may not need a bankruptcy attorney in the future. But a lot of businesses at some point sometimes do need a bankruptcy attorney, so they're able to close off the first business and then open up a new one in compliance with bankruptcy laws. Okay, next we're going to talk about civil disputes. So I know a lot of times when you guys think about court, you think about criminal disputes. Criminal disputes are very common. Again, typically what you see on TV, somebody has murdered somebody else, and now we're in court trying to figure out who's going to win this case. But there's a such thing as civil court as well. Civil litigation involves you drafting those motions, going before the judge, going into the courtroom, but it's not for a criminal issue. So it's all things that are not criminal, typically dealing with money. So if I want to sue Walmart because their sign fell on my back when I walked into the store, I would file a civil lawsuit for the harm that I've endured and for the damages that I feel that they owe me because of that harm. So that's what civil litigation is, essentially representing people that will be owed money for various issues. I know you guys have probably seen commercials about mesothelioma, or if you've ever heard of like a class action for people that have taken a particular medication or eaten at a particular place during a certain time that may be entitled to damages for harm that they endured. So all of those types of things would fall under civil litigation. That's a big topic that we often overlook. It's not just criminal law. You don't just need a lawyer when you're in trouble and have done some sort of crime. No, civil litigation is huge, and you need a lawyer to help you recover all of your damages fully. And damages essentially means, for the most part, money. Because you've had to pay medical expenses, you've had to, maybe get a new car, you've had to maybe take time off from work where you would have been receiving pay. All those various types of things require you to be paid. And it doesn't just have to be for physical harm. You can even get paid for emotional harm. So if this situation caused you to be depressed or to be crazy or to think outlandish thoughts, or to feel like you're losing your mind or to shut yourself off in a room, that is called emotional distress. And you may be entitled to money for emotional distress as well. So civil litigation is a huge topic. Definitely keep that in mind. Okay, next we're going to talk about civil rights attorneys. So civil rights attorneys, we appreciate them. We love them so much. They fight for the underserved communities. So think about if somebody is struggling with discrimination, or something that you may hear in the future is Title VII. So that's when somebody is discriminated against for race, for gender, for age. All of those various types of claims can be brought with a civil rights attorney. So when you're fighting for those various civil rights, you're basically ensuring that that underserved person or that underserved community is properly represented. So if I am in a employment situation where they denied me employment at this particular company or corporation based on my race, I would hire a civil rights attorney. And that civil rights attorney would help me to fight against this discrimination. And hopefully I'd be awarded some sort of damages for the trouble I had to endure because I was discriminated against. So again, thank you to all the civil rights attorneys. We need you and we appreciate your work. Okay, so here's the big one that everybody thinks about, everybody knows, everybody loves. When I first attended law school, I went into law school thinking that I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. That was my dream, that was my desire. I have a ton of family and friends that I've had to watch firsthand go through criminal issues and have been placed in the criminal system. And so I was like, I want to fight for these people. I want to be the person to really do the research and really get down to the bottom of it and help to shift our system, help people to get better sentences and things like that. So this is the area that a lot of people think of when they think about lawyers and the courtroom and the law, is criminal litigation. So criminal law does not always necessarily go to court. I do want to tell you guys that. You could have a plea agreement prior to court, prior to a jury hearing, where you agree to serve a certain number of years in jail or in prison, or maybe you agree to house arrest or some other lower level of punishment for this particular crime after pleading guilty to the crime. So that's what a plea agreement is. So if you take a plea agreement, the case never even makes it to trial. So I want to make that very clear that all criminal cases do not go to trial. If you do go to trial, you will see a prosecutor who is they work for the state. So you'll see a prosecutor or a district attorney that works for the state. On the one hand, they are typically representing the victim or the state, the person that has the most stake in the harmed party. And then on the other hand, you'll have the criminal defendant, which is represented by either a court-appointed attorney or by a privately retained attorney. So a court-appointed attorney to the defendant would be called the public defender, or they can pay money to an attorney that just practices criminal defense law, and that would be a privately retained attorney. Everybody has the right to an attorney in a criminal hearing. You will always have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one must be appointed to you in the sense of a public defender. But you always can have the right to counsel, is what it's called in the Fifth Amendment and Sixth Amendment, right to counsel. So I do want to make it clear again that even though somebody may be a criminal defense attorney, that does not mean that they practice all areas of criminal defense. Some criminal defense attorneys have figured out their niche, and they may only practice murder cases. They may only take murder cases, or some criminal defense attorneys may only want to take theft offenses, so robbery, larceny, embezzlement, things of that nature, while other criminal defense attorneys may take a wider range of crimes and cases. So it just kind of depends. When choosing an attorney, always make sure you do your research and always make sure you feel comfortable with whomever you're choosing, because you must have a very reliable and trustworthy relationship with your attorney, because it's such an important matter, regardless to whether that is civil, criminal, business, whatever the case may be. Your attorney has to be a trustworthy person, and you have to build that rapport and relationship with them. So always do your research and make sure you're picking the perfect attorney for you. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about entertainment law. Entertainment law is what I practice. So it's more so transactional. Now it can be, it can fall in the litigation sector as well. But again, it just kind of depends on what that particular attorney does. With entertainment law, you deal a lot with intellectual property. Intellectual property, honestly, was not a term that I was very familiar with prior to law school. But intellectual property deals with all of the intangible items that you don't typically think of when you think about physical property. So copyrights, trademarks, patents, all of those various types of things that help to promote entertainers' brands. So entertainment attorneys work with athletes, sports corporations, agencies, record labels, artists, singers, galore. So the entertainers essentially are what entertainment attorneys are for, and they just help these people and these corporations protect their brand. So if somebody is infringing on their brand, which means if somebody is using a particular piece of intellectual property that they're not supposed to, then that entertainment attorney will step in and help to remedy or fix that issue. So if I post a video on Instagram, and in the video there is a Beyonce song playing in the background, Instagram is going to take down my video. Or YouTube, if I post it on YouTube, YouTube will take down my video and say that I'm violating someone else's copyright. And even if they don't take it down, they may send me a notice that says, okay, if ever this video is monetized, if ever you make money from this video, then the person who owns this copyright will be entitled to payment from the video because you're using their intellectual property. They own that copyright. And so essentially what entertainment attorneys do is make sure that your product and your brand is protected. All of your intellectual property, all of your trademarks, all of your copywritten songs, all of your material is protected so that nobody else can use it without you getting paid for your hard work that you did. Okay, so kind of to piggyback off of entertainment law, we're going to talk about intellectual property attorneys. So I discussed intellectual property in the sense of entertainment. However, everybody can have intellectual property. Any company or business with a logo, a process of how they make a particular item or product, that would be a patent. A logo would be a trademark. If you have a saying that you want trademarked, so Nike, just do it. That has to be trademarked so nobody else can use that saying in commerce, because when you see just do it, you think of Nike, and that is intellectual property. So intellectual property covers a wide range of things. It's not just for entertainers, and everybody needs to have their intellectual property protected so that people know your brand, they respect your brand, and nobody else can use that without you getting paid for it and getting it taken down off of their platform. Anybody needs to have permission to be able to use and exploit your brand. So make sure once you're starting those businesses, no matter how big or small, you get things trademarked and copywritten. If you are a songwriter, if you like to write raps in school, and you make beats, whatever the case may be, you want to make sure you protect your material. Start thinking about how you're going to protect your material right now, because it's very, very important, especially when you start getting exposure and getting into the real world. You don't want people to be able to come around and steal your stuff. So make sure you have a good intellectual property attorney and know the law about intellectual property so that you can protect your brand. Moneybag Yo said you got to protect the brand. So make sure you protect your brand. Family law. I did an internship in a family law court back in 2013. It was a long time ago. And going into the family law internship, before I started, I thought that it was going to be very boring. I was like, oh, family law, boring stuff, no drama, no criminals, no nothing. But family law is actually full of drama, and it's full of chaos, and it was extremely interesting. My experience working in the family law court at the City County building here in Indianapolis. So the thing that makes family law interesting, they say that in family law, people are on their worst behavior because they want to make the other party look bad. So if I'm dealing with a divorce case, or I'm dealing with a child support case, or I'm dealing with a child custody case, I want to make the other person look bad so that things can go in my favor. Whereas in criminal law, you deal with the best of people because they don't want to go to jail. So they're on their best behavior. But in family law, people are on their worst behavior. You see their true colors. They're pulling out all the stops to try and get this other person to look horrible so that they can win the case and things can go their way. So in family law, again, you deal with things like child support, divorce, alimony, prenuptial agreements, marriages, all of those various types of things. A prenuptial agreement is a pre-marriage agreement that outlines various assets that the person who wrote the agreement may own, and that what they are willing to give the other party. So it's between a husband and a wife. I know we hear Kanye West say, we want prenup, but some of us may not know what that means. And that just means that, you know, the wife or the husband will or will not be entitled to particular assets. And again, remember, assets are ownership outside of money. So things that are acquired, properties and things like that. Before the marriage, the husband or wife will not be entitled to those assets unless it's outlined in the prenuptial agreement. So it kind of places limits on what you can get from your husband or wife once they agree to this prenuptial agreement. So that's family law. It's crazy, it gets wild. People get emotional, and you know, when emotions are involved, you don't think very rationally. So contrary to popular belief, family law is actually a really interesting topic of the law. Okay, so we also have environmental attorneys. Environmental attorneys help to enact various laws to protect our environment. So if you think about protecting endangered species, or if you see a park or a forest that has a sign up that says no hunting, environmental laws and environmental lawyers would help to implement and enact those various laws and make sure that people are seeing to them. A lot of times you'll see environmental attorneys working for nonprofits that help with the environment. If you think about laws like the Clean Water Act and things like that, that just deal with, you know, clean air, clean water, clean parks, clean environment. Those are environmental attorneys, and we certainly need them in place to be able to help us with our ozone and our atmosphere to maintain clean air, clean water, and a clean space for us to live. A labor and employment attorney is an attorney that deals with employment law. So when you think of employment law, always think about what the employer wants and what the employee needs. So if you're being discriminated against at work, if you're not receiving your benefits, if your employer has infringed upon your rights in some sense, if your employee has violated a term of their employment agreement, all of these things would fall under labor and employee relations. So labor and employment law is very important. Every business should have a labor and employment attorney on their staff to deal with those issues in-house, so that hopefully things don't have to go outside and be litigated within the courtroom. But labor and employment law is very, very, very important, so that not only the employer, which is the company, is getting what they need and desire, but also so that the employee can make sure they are receiving the rights that they are entitled to while working for this particular employer. Okay, personal injury. And again, this falls under civil law, but it's just kind of something that I wanted to discuss. Personal injury is when one person harms another and they are entitled to damages. So you'll hear these claims often referred to as tort claims. And when there's a tort claim, it's typically for negligence. Negligence happens, let's say if somebody's driving a car and there's a car accident, And so I want to sue you for the damage to my car, for my medical expenses, for my injuries, for the time I lost at work, all of those various types of things. But to prove that somebody was negligent, you have to prove that they had a duty. So in this case, they had a duty to drive safely, or they had a duty to stop at the stop sign. Then they breached that duty. So they ran the stop sign and they were not driving safely. And because they breached that duty, they caused my injury. Duty, breach, and causation. So because they ran this stop sign, they weren't driving safely, they caused the car crash that I was involved in, and then as a separate cause, they caused my injuries. So because of this, that would result in a negligence claim, and you would be entitled to a personal injury claim against this plaintiff. The plaintiff is the person that did the alleged harm, while the defendant, I'm sorry. So cut that. Wait, don't cut the camera, but just cut that. I said, I'm sorry, clear my throat. And then I'm about to say it right now. Okay. The plaintiff is the person that was allegedly harmed by this breach of duty, by this person's negligence. And then the defendant is the negligent party that will owe damages to the plaintiff if they are found to be guilty of negligence. There's also real estate attorneys. So real estate attorneys deal with all things dealing with the purchase and sale of land and property. So land too matters. So don't just think about when you see a big building, also think about the land that the building sits on. If you see grass somewhere that's empty with nothing on it, somebody owns that land. Even if it's just the city of Indianapolis, somebody owns that land, and that is real estate. So there's two different types of real estate. There's residential and there's commercial. Residential, of course, is where people live. So a housing complex or various houses where people reside. Commercial real estate is where businesses are held. So where you see restaurants, buildings that restaurants are in, or gas stations, things like that. That is commercial real estate. Real estate attorneys cover a wealth of real estate. That's all they do. And so they'll know the laws dealing with commercial real estate versus residential real estate. They'll know the zoning laws. So if you purchase a piece of property, you're only able to do particular things with that property based on how it's zoned. Even in a commercial sense, there's different levels of commercial zoning. So if you purchase a property that's commercially zoned for a restaurant, but you're using that property as a camera business, or a retail store, then you may get shut down because you violated the zoning laws. So they'll make sure you're very familiar with zoning laws and rights, and they'll make sure that you purchase the right property for what it is that you desire to do with it. And then they'll make sure you're in compliance even after your purchase. And then of course, drafting contracts, negotiations, purchase agreements, contracts for sale of property, and all of those various types of things. That is why we need real estate attorneys. Okay, so something that we don't typically learn about is the tricks to taxes. There is a tax code, and once you master that tax code, it is an avenue for greater wealth. And that's something we're just simply not taught. But tax attorneys have mastered that tax code, and they are very good at letting their clients know what they qualify for and kind of being able to lighten that burden of having to pay back Uncle Sam, having to pay back those taxes. Each and every year, you have to pay state taxes and you have to pay federal taxes. Some people's burden is larger than others. But when you have a lot of income and you have a tax attorney, they're able to look at your income, they're able to look at your expenses, and they're able to say, okay, we can have a write-off here, we can write off this amount, you don't have to pay this amount, and they're able to lower that burden and lower that amount of money that you owe back to the government so that you don't ever owe the IRS, or if you do, the amount that you owe is very minimum as opposed to the regular amount of knowledge that we get just as a normal person. In summary, tax law is extremely important to help people get out of trouble with the IRS and to keep people out of trouble with the IRS. And lastly, to learn the tax code. be sure and get a tax attorney. Banking and finance attorneys are very good for security agreements. Security agreements are when you take out a loan and your loan is secured by some sort of collateral. So if you think about when you purchase a vehicle, if you didn't pay cash for your car, you typically will take out a car loan, and that secured creditor they hold that car as collateral. So if at any point you default on your loan or you stop paying those payments, that secured creditor is able to come pick up your car and take it back as their own because you stopped paying on that loan. But banking attorneys and things of that nature make sure that the security agreements are written properly. They check all ancillary agreements, transactions, and things of that nature to make sure things are done correctly and that secured parties, bankers, and creditors are secured. If you were to hire a banking attorney as an individual, they would ensure that all your rights are met and that your financial needs are granted in those various agreements and that nobody's getting over on you as well. Estate planning attorney. So estate planning attorneys handle all of your business if something were to happen or if a person were to pass away. Estate planning is very important, and oftentimes all we think about is living. And so we don't really consider what happens to our lives and to our assets and to our belongings and how those things are divided after we pass away. But it's very, very important to have an estate planning attorney so that you're able to put your will and your trust together so that all of your belongings and your personal property as well as your real property are able to be divided in a way that you would want them to be divided. Once you die, that doesn't mean that collections go away. That doesn't mean that you have to stop paying taxes. That doesn't mean that creditors can't come after everything that you left behind for your family or for your children or for your friends. And so you want to make sure that you hire an estate planning attorney so they can put together a plan that protects your assets, protects all of your belongings, protects all of your property from being able to be governed by creditors and infiltrated by the IRS once you pass away. Because you could leave $1 million to your daughter, but if you had tax debt before you passed away, that tax debt still exists. And if you leave $1 million to your daughter without consulting with an attorney about the best way to do it, then the IRS may be able to come and take that million away from her. And then that, of course, was not the legacy in which you intended. That is not what you desired. And so you want to make sure you're protected on all fronts and that you consult with an attorney about writing up a will, about putting your assets in a trust, and all of the various things to protect your property even after you pass away. And last but not least, we're going to talk about immigration attorneys. So I know oftentimes you see a lot of people that have come into America that may not necessarily be from here. And in order to come into America and be accepted as a citizen or a resident documented alien, you have to have documentation in place. You have to have a visa. You have to have a visitor's visa. Just like if you were to go to another country, you'd have to have a passport to enter that country, and that's only for a particular amount of time. But if ever you decided you wanted to live there, you would need documents as an alien to become a resident of that particular country. So immigrants just make sure that companies are covered. If they're hiring people that maybe don't have their documents yet or aren't documented here in the United States, they help them to work through that documentation so that they don't get in trouble or violate any laws when hiring people that are not United States citizens. They also help people to gain their citizenship or to get passports and to get visas and things of that nature so that everyone is in compliance here in the United States and does not have any fear or worry of getting deported. So hopefully this information was very helpful to you today, and I know I've said a lot. I've just briefly covered a lot of areas of law, the ones that are most accessible to people, the ones that people deal with the most. And so hopefully this is helpful for you and you've learned quite a bit today. But again, there is a world and universe of law that we did not even discuss today. But hopefully today's conversation just kind of pricked your brain to want to learn and discover a little bit more about law, the different types of attorneys, the different areas of law, and how well-versed of a field it is. And I'll end by saying this. If you have any interest in going to law school and becoming an attorney, just know that your options are far and wide. Just because you go to law school and you get your Juris Doctorate, which is your degree to become an attorney, that does not mean you have to practice criminal defense. There are people that graduate from law school and they don't practice law. There are plenty of jobs that pay more than 6 figures to come in and analyze their contracts, to do employee relations, to work under their legal team, just not as a litigator. So there are tons of options. It's a great degree to have. It helps you with your negotiation skills, your conflict resolution, your active listening, your attention to detail. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful degree, and the options in which to use this degree are endless. So hopefully this has helped you learn a little bit more about the area of law in the legal field, to be able to make a more informed decision about maybe potentially pursuing this field in the future. Thank you so much.